just like Will and his mates in Stranger Things. Back in the day, all of us nerdy kids played D&D, or as it was then, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And I've still got my old books and Dungeon Master's screen with all those crazy tables. Somehow I also managed to keep some of the white metal figures, monsters and wizards that I lovingly painted, ready for their adventures, all at the whim of a dice roll. Of course at the time 3D printers were unheard of, but in this video I want to share my printable floor plans, something I wish we'd had back then, and hopefully something that current 5th edition players, like our own nerdy kids, will find useful in their gameplay as their characters explore the dungeons of their own. With my modular system, individual flagstone tiles, designed in TinkerCad, are arranged into room shapes with appropriate exits in my slicing software and printed in low relief, giving us a realistic surface underpinned by the grid. We need to follow the rules of the game, like correctly positioning our figures for combat. Along the way I'll share how I used the Scribble tool in TinkerCad for those irregular flagstones, and how, with only 4 designs, the tiles can be quickly arranged into a whole variety of room shapes without any obvious repetition. And finally, I'll show you where you can find some doorways, behind which the next stages of the adventure are hidden. For the design of the tiles, I'm going to be using TinkerCad, starting with a simple slab, 25mm square and 1mm deep, typing the dimensions into the boxes for each axis. This is our base, and each tile will butt up against one another when we come to do the slicing, to form our grid for each room of the dungeon. Now we want to add the irregular flagstones, and for this I'm going to be using the Scribble tool, finding it using the search function in the Shapes menu. Clicking on our base has a slightly unexpected effect, taking us to a new workspace with a preview pane in the top right. Here we've got some basic tools. We can draw with the freehand pen. We've got buttons for undo and redo and an eraser. But it's the freehand shape tool we want, drawing the wiggly outline of our flagstone using the mouse, which is actually ideally suited for getting the irregularity we want. Our shape only appears in the preview pane when complete, making it hard to get the relative position to the base right, so I decided not to bother too much about that now, and just use the grid on the work plane to fill a 3x3 square, which I can scale and align to the base block later. Obviously it's quite hard to get a smooth line using the mouse, but that actually suits the rough shape for our flagstones and the uneven gaps in between, so it doesn't take long to draw out 4 slabs, very much making up the shapes as I go, trying to get a good variety of sizes, with some interesting angles for the edges, whilst trying to keep the gaps between relatively even. And when the outline of the last one is complete, that too appears on the preview pane. But before we leave the Scribble workspace, let's just do a bit of tidying up, using the negative freehand shape tool to remove any bits we don't like, or to shave bits off if we think the gaps are a bit too narrow. It's worth noting that the tool will remove stuff from all of the things underneath, and if you let go midway, it'll complete the path with a straight line, so it's important to go all the way round so you don't lose bits you don't want to. But even if you do, it's easy to put things back in again using the ordinary shape tool. And when we're happy with all of our flagstones, we can hit the Done button, taking us back to the normal TinkerCad workspace. Our 4 scribbled flagstones, now a single object, which we can move around just like any others, and scale by dragging the corner points, until we're happy with its position on the base slab, leaving a bit around the edge to preserve the grid. But the good thing is our shape is still editable, and a double click will take us back to the Scribble workspace, where we can add or remove anything we didn't like, hitting the Done button when we're finished. And here's our revised object, in exactly the same place as it was, although oddly it has reverted to the perspective view, which it seems to do whenever you come out of the Scribble workspace. Now all we need to do is reduce the height, and it's just worth noting that our scribbled object is actually on top of the tile, rather than flat on the work plane. Then all that remains is to group our objects, the base tile and the flagstones, and purely to give a better idea of what it's going to look like when printed, make it a nice pale grey. Now we just need to give it a name. Rather than untitled, new TinkerCad documents come up with some pretty silly names, but we need something more prosaic, just typing over the auto-generated one. So far so good, but to get that real dungeon floor look, we're going to need some more designs, otherwise it's going to look pretty repetitive. So holding down the Alt key, I'm making a duplicate of the base slab, onto which I'm going to start to scribble a new set of flagstones using the same method, which obviously you don't need to see at real time. So here instead is the speeded up version. You can see I'm trying to do something different from the first, mixing up not only the sizes and the shapes, but also the number of flagstones, adding in some little ones, and also some holes in the bigger ones. Once again, clicking Done when finished. Then we can position and scale the combined shape, much easier to do in the flat view. And if you're struggling to get it exactly where you want it, you can reduce the snap to distance, adjusting the setting in the menu at the corner of the pane, making it much easier to move more accurately. And when we're happy with that one, it's on to the next. I'm going to be making just 4 tiles, exporting each as its own STL, which can be brought into my slicing software and assembled into each room shape. There the tiles can also be rotated. That will actually give me 4 variations of each, so plenty of variety to avoid repetition. And with all 4 done, we just need to reduce the height of each, bringing the thickness of each scribbled object down to 1 mm, remembering they're actually on top of the base tiles, rather than flat on the work plane. At the end of the day, I made them a bit thinner, just 3 layers for the base and 3 for the flagstones. And it's the STLs of these final versions that you can find and download from my website if you want to use those rather than designing your own. And if you do, please consider leaving a super thanks by hitting the button below, and of course subscribe. Then with each one grouped with its base and given a rather random colour, it's time to export as STLs. For this I'm temporarily adding a suffix to the file name. Then when I hit the export button, I can choose just the selected shape, so tile A will just be the brown one. Then the same for the beige, that could be tile B, and then exported just as the selected shape. Then exactly the same for tiles C and D, the grey ones. With all 4 tile designs exported, it's time to lay them out as rooms in my slicing software, ready to print out for my dungeon, dragging and dropping the STLs from my desktop, where I put them for easy access. I'm using Cura, mainly because it's free, but the process will be much the same for any other software. I'm not sure about other programs, but Cura puts things where it wants, starting in the middle and working outwards. So the first thing we need to do is move the tiles where we want them, A bottom left, B where Cura put it, C next door to that, with D directly above. I'm not worrying about the exact position now, just getting the tiles onto the work plane, adding another A, which Cura puts bang in the middle, exactly where we want it. The next B will have to move, as I want to maintain a logical sequence, A, B, C, D, as the tiles snake up through the room, so the next C goes above the B, Cura putting our next D alongside. Then we can put another A in the corner. This arrangement ensures that each tile is adjacent to a different one, and we never have 2 of the same next door to each other. It's also the sequence in which they will print, the order they were added to the work plane. Now we need the edges to butt up against each other, and by far the easiest way of doing this is to type in the coordinates. Our central tile was dropped in at 0, 0, 0, so now we need to adjust the position of those around it by changing the values of the x and y coordinates to plus or minus 25, or 0 depending on where they are. Of course, Z will stay at 0 for all the tiles. Now it would be nice if, like TinkerCad, Cura had some way of snapping objects to the grid. If it does, it's very well hidden, so please leave a comment if you know where to find it. But keying in the values is no great hardship, and at least we know that they are perfectly aligned. One way to avoid this would have been to lay the room out in TinkerCad before exporting, but as a single object you'd lose a bit of the grid, reinforced by printing the tiles sequentially. So let's review what we've got. A, B, C along the bottom, then a D and another A, which whilst not actually next door, is quite close to the one in the corner. But rotating it 90 degrees makes it look quite different. Likewise with the 2 Bs, a click on the blue arrow of the rotation tool, turning that by 90 degrees as well. Even though the next C is nowhere near the other one, I'm going to turn it anyway, so I get a nicer arrangement of the cracks in the slab. A second click of the blue arrow, turning it a full 180 degrees, then the same for tile D at the top, giving our 3x3 room an apparently random distribution. Now I want to add an exit at the top, which can be anything other than a D, and the Y coordinate for that will be minus 50. I've gone for a B as there's not one in the top row, but rotating it anyway so it's not like any of the others. And that's our room ready for slicing, which when it's done can be previewed, giving us a much clearer impression of what we're going to get. As I mentioned earlier, I actually reduced the height of each tile to a total of 1.2 mm, and moving the slider on the right will take us through the layers, 3 for the base and 3 for the flagstones themselves. Then we can save to our SD card. But before ejecting, I want to change the file name, as Cura has simply titled it after my first tile. So in the Finder I want to overtype that, and call it something more descriptive, so I can easily find out which one I want to print from the menu screen on my printer, a cheap and cheerful Ender 3 Neo. Essentially, we're printing 10 different objects, the first layer of each being laid down in the order that we added them to Cura, and being directly next door to one another, they effectively stick together. the printer methodically working through our sequence, moving on to an adjacent tile when the first layer of each is done, stepping up to layer 2 when all 10 are finished. With just 3 layers of the square base and 3 for the flagstones, it doesn't take that long to print the room, and even my relatively slow Ender 3 has it all done in about an hour and a quarter. When the print bed has cooled, we can have a look at our handiwork. Even with just 3 base layers, it's plenty strong enough, and the 3 for the flagstones give us good definition for that realistic dungeon floor look, with a clear grid on which we can arrange our minifigs for them to fight their monstrous foes. But of course, all rooms of a dungeon are not the same, and it's here that the modular nature of my system comes into its own. Say we want essentially the same room, but with 2 additional exits. All we need to do is add more tiles, just making sure we select a different one to the one next door, moving it from where Cura decides to put it to where we want it, once again typing in the coordinates, this time 50mm as we're 2 tiles from the centre, or -50 for the one on the other side. Our print sequence will essentially be the same as before, as we haven't made any changes to the main part of the room, with our 2 new tiles printing in the order that we added them. So you can see it's quite useful to set up similar sized rooms in the same session so you can keep the main structure. Our new tiles also look good the way they are, so no need to rotate this time. But we do want to do the file name change, so having saved to the removable drive, we want to get our SD card up in the Finder and overtype the default with something more descriptive, obviously making sure it's different from the previous one. Then we can close the Finder window and safely eject the card, ready to print our new room. Now quite a lot of dungeon rooms are fairly generic, squares or rectangles with a couple of exits, so a lot of your prints will be reusable. But there will usually be at least one feature room, a great hall or something like that. But it's easy to see how even larger or more complex rooms can be built up using the same modular system, or even adapted from an existing room. Again, using the tile coordinates to get each in exactly the right place, also bearing in mind the order that they've been added, so the print sequence is logical and the print head doesn't have to bot all over the place. With an occasional preview of the slice file, we can also check for obvious repeats, rotating and rearranging if required. Then it's on with adding tiles, remembering that they go where Cura wants to put them, so we'll need to drag them into place and set their coordinates. As we add more tiles, it's easy to lose track of the sequence, but if you do, you can reset the print order of a tile by first deleting it, then undoing that from the edit menu, Cura now regarding that tile as the most recent addition. You may also find your larger room straying off the edge of the print bed, but that's easy to fix. Just select all of your tiles and reset the central coordinates. Then, having previewed the sliced file and another check for any obvious repetition, we can save to our SD card, remembering not to eject straight away, instead changing the name in the Finder. Then we'll know which one to print. And of course, we've still got the G-code for the other rooms should we need to print any more of those. Then with the name changed, we can safely eject the SD card. And here's our printed room, 3x5 with 4 exits. And it's for those that I want to make some doors. And even though the internet is awash with suitable designs, the answer is actually much closer to home, back in TinkerCad, where we can make use of the extensive Shapes menu, simply searching for door. And in amongst several other promising candidates, here's exactly what we're looking for. A nice gnarly wooden door with decorative heavy-duty hinges and the bonus of its own stone arch. All we need to do is make it the right size, clicking on one of the anchor points and typing in values for the height and width, leaving it reasonably thick so it stands up on its own, and then give it a slightly less silly name. Just like the tiles themselves, I've also included the STL to download from my website, and that's what we're going to make now, ready for slicing in the usual way and printing. Now I could have made the doors part of the room design and printed them in situ along with the floor tiles, but I figured it would be much more flexible to have them separate, printing off a good number and using them as and where. It also makes the flat floor plans easier to store for reuse another time. But it's not just the addition of doors that will make our dungeon environments more interesting. We can design and print our own objects, adding treasure chests or other items of furniture. And it's things like that, as well as variations on our floor plan tiles, like stairs and alcoves, that I'll be covering in a follow-up film. Also looking at a method for irregular rooms, like caverns, that don't quite fit the normal grid. So if you think that will be of interest, don't forget to subscribe. But even with just our floor plans and doors, we've got added realism and structure for our gameplay. And let's not forget that Dungeons & Dragons is a game of the imagination, and even while adding the doors, we can be describing the scenario, the features of the room, and the textures of the walls, which are only there in our imagination. It is called fantasy, after all. Then we can get on with the role play, how our characters react to the situation they're in, how the monsters they meet can be dispatched, delving deeper into their dungeon adventure, floor plans of new rooms being added when they find them,